My wife Carol drove to the storage facility on Maple Ridge Road every Saturday morning for 28 years. And I never once thought to ask her why. She would leave right after breakfast. Same time, every week, rain or shine, summer or February ice. She wore her blue canvas jacket and carried a thermos of black coffee. When I asked early in our marriage where she was going, she said the same thing every time. Just organizing the unit, Ray. You know I can't stand clutter. I accepted that because Carol was the kind of woman who alphabetized her spice rack and color-coded the filing cabinet. A woman like that absolutely would drive across Cincinnati on a Saturday to organize old furniture. I believed her for 28 years. I believed her right up until the moment I was standing at the edge of her grave in the rain, and my son put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Dad, we need to talk about the house." Carol passed on a Tuesday in early March, a little before dawn. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't give you much warning and doesn't give you much time. We had 4 months from diagnosis to the end, 4 months to say everything we needed to say, though I never found the right words, and I don't think she did either. Some things live between two people in the silence, and when one of them is gone. The funeral was on a Friday. The weather was gray and wet, the kind of cold that settles into your knees and doesn't leave. She had picked out her own casket the previous November, which is exactly the kind of practical thing Carol would do. She had left a list of hymns, a preferred florist, and a handwritten note asking that there be no lilies because she thought they smelled like a hospital. I stood at the grave for a long time after the pastor finished. My son Nathan was there with his wife Dana. My daughter Gwen stood a few feet behind them, texting on her phone without making any effort to hide it. Nathan was 42, a regional sales manager for a logistics company. Gwen was 38 and worked in marketing. They were adults. They had their own homes, their own lives. I had no complaint with how they turned out. Or at least, that is what I had always told myself. Dana stepped forward before I had turned away from the grave. She was tall, impeccably dressed, even for a graveside service, and she had the kind of smile that never quite made it to her eyes. She had been my daughter-in-law for 11 years, and in that time I had never once felt that she considered me anything more than a background fixture in Nathan's life. "Ray," she said. "Not Dad, just Ray. There are some logistics we need to go over. About the property." Ray. I looked at her. I had just buried my wife. The dirt on the grave was still dark and wet. "Can it wait until we get home, Dana?" "That's actually what we need to discuss," she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "We've been doing some research. The deed to the house on Calvert Street was in Carol's name alone. You know that. And 6 months ago, when she was managing the estate paperwork before she declined, she transferred the title into a family trust. Nathan and I are the co-trustees." I stared at her. The rain was getting heavier. "What are you saying?" Nathan finally looked up from his shoes. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, which is more than I can say for his wife. "It's just that the house is an estate asset now, Dad, and with Mom gone, the trust controls it. Dana and I have been looking at the numbers, and honestly, the property taxes alone on that place are going to be a problem. You're on a fixed income. And rather, in Backy, your pension from the electrical union is what, $1,400 a month? It covers my needs," I said. "It doesn't cover the house," Dana said flatly. She handed me the folded paper. I opened it. It was a brochure for a senior living community called Lakeview Gardens. The cover photo showed 2 elderly people playing checkers in a sunlit room. "We found a studio unit that fits your budget. It's month to month, which is nice. We'd like you to be out of Calvert Street by the end of the month." Gwen had put her phone away. She was watching me with an expression I could only describe as relieved, as if the hard part had already been done and someone else had done it. 23 years I had lived in that house. I had replaced the furnace twice. I had laid every tile in the kitchen with my own hands. Carol had planted those rose bushes along the back fence in the first spring after we moved in, and they came back every year without fail, stubborn and brilliant, just like her. I folded the brochure and put it in my pocket. "You're giving me until the end of the month," I said. "The real estate agent comes Monday," Dana confirmed. "For photos." She turned and walked back to the car. Nathan followed, without looking at me. Gwen gave me a small apologetic shrug, the shrug of someone who knows something is wrong but has already decided not to fight it. And then she followed her brother. I stood alone at Carol's grave for another 10 minutes. The roses at the florist's arrangements were wilting in the cold. I thought about 28 years of Saturday mornings. I thought about the thermos of black coffee and the blue canvas jacket. And I thought about a woman who managed to love me deeply and keep a secret from me for 3 decades at the same time. I drove home in silence. The house on Calvert Street was already different when I walked in. Nathan and Dana had been there before me. The china hutch in the dining room was open, and 2 of the good serving plates Carol had inherited from her mother were missing from the shelf. A cardboard box in the living room held the silver candlesticks we used every Thanksgiving. Dana had taped the box shut with packing tape she had apparently brought herself. I sat down in the armchair by the window and I looked at the room I had lived in for more than 2 decades. I looked at the walls where Carol's photograph still hung our wedding picture, Nathan and Gwen as children, a framed photo of me and Carol at Niagara Falls the summer after I retired. I looked at the rug Carol had bought at an estate sale and argued me into loving over the course of 3 months. Then I remembered the jewelry box. Carol's jewelry box sat on the dresser in our bedroom, exactly where it had always been. It was a plain wooden box her father had made for her when she was 16. Nothing fancy, just pine and a brass latch. I had always stayed out of it. Carol was private about certain things, and the jewelry box was one of them. I opened it. Most of what was inside was what I expected. Her mother's pearl earrings. A thin gold bracelet I had given her for our 20th anniversary. A small enamel pin shaped like a hummingbird that she wore on her coat every winter. And in the very bottom corner, tucked beneath a folded piece of tissue paper, was a key. It was small and unremarkable, the kind that opens a padlock. But taped to the key with a strip of yellowed tape was a handwritten note in Carol's careful script. It said 4 words. "For Ray. You'll know." I sat on the edge of the bed and held the key for a long time. I thought I would sleep. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room and thought about who Carol was, the real Carol. The one I had apparently known, only in part. She was meticulous. She was deliberate. She did not leave things to chance. And she did not leave things unexplained unless she had a specific reason for the omission. A key with a note that said "you'll know" was not an accident. It was a direction. By 6 in the morning I was in the car. The storage facility on Maple Ridge Road opened at 7. I had always assumed Carol was the only one on the account. But when I showed the manager her death certificate and the key, he pulled up the file and said my name was listed as secondary access holder. Carol had added me to the account 17 years ago. She had made sure I could get in when I needed to. The unit was a 12 by 20 space at the end of the building's second corridor. I unlocked the padlock with the key from the jewelry box and rolled up the metal door. The unit was nearly empty. There was no old furniture. There were no boxes of keepsakes or seasonal decorations. There was a metal shelving unit along one wall, completely bare, and in the center of the concrete floor, there was a single folding chair. On the chair was a flat blue envelope, the kind that comes from a bank. I sat down on the floor. I opened the envelope. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Carol's handwriting, dated 8 weeks before she died. There was also a key card with the logo of First Federal Trust, a bank I had never had an account with. "Ray," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then Saturday worked out the way I always hoped. I need you to go to First Federal on Reading Road and ask for Mr. Crawford. He's been waiting for you. He'll take care of everything. I'm sorry I kept this to myself. I'll explain when you get there, but I want you to hear it in order. The money first, then the rest. The rest is the hard part. I love you every day of our life together. Every single one." The drive to the bank took 11 minutes. It took me 20 because I had to pull over twice. Mr. Crawford turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his late 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of unhurried manner that suggested he had been expecting difficult conversations his entire career. He met me in the lobby before I had finished explaining who I was. He shook my hand with both of his and said, "Mr. Morrison, we've been holding the account in preparation. I'm so sorry for your loss." Carol was one of the most extraordinary clients I've ever worked with. He led me to a private office on the second floor and closed the door. I will not pretend I handled what came next with dignity. I didn't. Carol had opened an investment account at First Federal 28 years ago with $400. The $400 came from selling a quilt she had made that winter. Every week after that, Saturday morning after Saturday morning, she had come to this branch and deposited between $50 and $200 from the household budget. She managed money. She had stretched and saved and trimmed without ever making me feel poor or deprived. And every week, under Mr. Crawford's guidance, she had reinvested it. She had bought stock in companies she believed in. She had purchased a small rental property in 2001 when the market was cheap, then another in 2008 when everyone else was selling in a panic. She had reinvested every dividend, compounded every gain, and never once spent $1 on herself when she could put it back in. Mr. Crawford placed a single page on the desk in front of me. The current value of Carol Morrison's investment portfolio, including the 2 rental properties and the accumulated market holdings, was $19,840,000. I looked at that number for a very long time. I thought about the coupons Carol clipped every Sunday from the newspaper insert. I thought about the years she drove a car with 180,000 miles on it, because it still ran fine. I thought about every vacation we didn't take, and every restaurant we cooked at home instead of going to, and I understood with a clarity that felt like cold water that she had not been depriving us. She had been building something. For me, I was 66 years old and my children were planning to move me into a studio apartment, and I was worth nearly $20 million. Mr. Crawford let me sit with it. He brought water. He didn't say anything unnecessary. After a while, he said, "She left something else for you." And he placed a green spiral notebook on the desk. It was the kind of notebook you buy at a drugstore. The cover was worn, and the pages were thick with use. Carol had labeled it in black, marker, "Family Account." "She asked that you read the financial summary first," Mr. Crawford said quietly. "She said the notebook was for after. She said you'd need to be steady before you opened it." I was as steady as I was going to get. I opened the notebook. The first entry was dated March 2007. Nathan's name was at the top of the page. Below it, written in Carol's precise accountant's hand, was a dollar amount and a description. $160,000. Liability settlement. Workplace incident. Employee injured. Nathan at fault. Alcohol involved. Out-of-court settlement to prevent criminal filing. I had not known any of this. In March 2007, Nathan had told me he was going through a rough patch at work and needed to borrow $800 for car insurance. I had given it to him from the emergency savings in the garage. His mother had quietly paid $160,000 to keep him out of a courtroom. I turned the page. Gwen, September 2013. $85,000. Private debt resolution. Sports betting. Threat of collection enforcement. Gwen, who had called me from a parking lot in 2013, crying about a billing error on her credit card. Her mother had paid a loan shark's debt without telling a soul. I turned more pages. Dana appeared twice. A corporate compliance matter in 2016 that cost Carol $60,000 to make disappear. A subsequent relocation stipend to help Nathan and Dana buy into a more prestigious zip code. $65,000, which Dana had apparently characterized to Nathan as an early inheritance from Carol. Dana had known about Carol's money, not the full amount, but enough to know there was a source she could return to. I closed the notebook. The man who had walked into that bank an hour ago and the man sitting in that chair now were not the same person. Something had burned off, the way fog burns off a river when the sun comes up. And what was left underneath was clear and cold and completely awake. "Mr. Crawford," I said, "I'm going to need an attorney." He nodded like he had been expecting it. Carol anticipated that. She retained James Hargrove on your behalf 18 months ago. He's been on standby. She retained Ed Sear to one them. I can have him here within the hour if you're ready. I'm ready, I said. I drove back to Calvert Street that evening, looking exactly like what they expected to see. I had not changed my clothes. I had not shaved. I drove slowly, and I parked in the driveway, and I walked into my house with my shoulders bent. Nathan and Dana were at the kitchen table with a laptop open. They had pulled up real estate listings for comparable properties in the neighborhood. Dana had a notepad with figures written on it. The missing serving plates were in a box by the back door. "You're still here," Dana said when she saw me. "I don't have anywhere to go yet," I said. They both went still. "Was there anything valuable?" Nathan asked carefully. "Nothing useful," I said. "Old boxes. A chair." I looked at the table. There was a letter, though, from the county tax office, apparently forwarded to the unit's address. Carol must have been using it for some mail for some reason. I don't know. "What kind of letter?" Dana asked. "A notice," I said. I let my voice go thin and frightened, which was not entirely difficult given that 12 hours earlier I had been standing at my wife's grave. Apparently Carol had a contractor dispute in 2016 that went to small claims. She never told me. The judgment was never fully paid. With interest and penalties, it's $43,000. And because the property is now in the trust, the county is saying Nathan and Dana are responsible. I looked at my son. They said if it isn't resolved in 30 days, they can put a lien on the house and it would delay any sale. Dana's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. "That can't be right," she said. "Carol paid all her bills. She was obsessive about it." "I have the letter," I said. I had typed it myself at a copy shop that afternoon and aged it convincingly in my jacket pocket. "I don't understand all of it. I just know they're threatening to come after the estate." Nathan grabbed the paper and read it. His jaw tightened. $43,000. "I know you don't have it," I said quietly. "I know things are tight. I'm not asking. I just thought you should know before you start the sale process." I folded my hands on the table. "Unless you could help me pay it. I could pay you back from the sale proceeds. Once the house sells, you'd get it all back." Nathan looked at Dana. Dana looked at the letter. I watched them. I watched the calculation happen in real time. I watched them decide that $43,000 was too much to risk and too inconvenient to produce, and that a sick old man with no money and no options was not their problem to solve. "Dad," Nathan said at last, "I'm sorry. We just can't. We have our own obligations right now. Our mortgage, the kids' tuitions. If we had the liquidity, we would, obviously. But we don't." "Obviously," Dana echoed, sliding the letter back toward me. "What about the nursing home? Lakeview Gardens?" I asked. I looked at their pricing. "It's more than my pension covers. I don't know how I'd manage." "You'd figure it out," Gwen said from the doorway. I hadn't heard her come in. She was holding a cup of coffee and looking at the floor. "You could sell your car," Dana suggested. "That would cover several months." I nodded slowly. I let my chin drop. I let the silence sit there between us. "All right," I said finally. "I understand." I stood up and walked to the bedroom and closed the door. They were gone by 9 o'clock. I sat in the dark for 20 minutes, listening to the silence of a house that was mine in every way that mattered to any reasonable person. And then I got up and I called James Hargrove. I told him to proceed. 3 days later, I walked into the conference room at Hargrove and Associates on the 14th floor of the Carew Tower, wearing a dark gray suit I had purchased the day before and a pair of leather shoes that were the most comfortable things I had ever put on my feet. I had my hair cut properly for the first time in a year. I smelled of cedar and clean wool. Nathan, Dana, and Gwen arrived 7 minutes late. Dana was wearing sunglasses. She was talking about an open house she wanted to schedule for the following Sunday. They stopped talking when they walked through the door. It took Dana longer than the others to recognize me. The suit helped. So did the posture. When she finally made the connection, Her face did something interesting. The professional confidence drained out of it, like water from a glass, replaced by something I had never seen on her before. Uncertainty. "What is this?" Nathan asked. "Sit down," I said. James Hargrove, a compact, deliberate man who had the energy of someone who had been looking forward to this meeting, spread 3 documents across the table before they had finished pulling out their chairs. "Your mother," he said, "did not die without a plan. She established the Carol R. Morrison Living Trust on October 3rd of last year, at which time all assets were transferred into the trust, including the real estate at Calvert Street." He paused. "However, the trust document you were shown 6 months ago was not the operative document. It was a preliminary draft that your mother's previous attorney generated and which your mother declined to execute. The deed transfer your wife referenced at the cemetery," he added, nodding at Dana, "was based on that draft. It was never filed." Dana's jaw tightened. "That's not possible. We had it reviewed." "You had an unexecuted draft reviewed," Hargrove said. "A version that was superseded when Carol retained this office in October." He slid the trust document toward them. "The executed trust names 1 trustee and 1 primary beneficiary. That is, Mr. Raymond Morrison. You are welcome to read the designation on page 4. Gwen was the first one to turn to page 4. I watched her face go pale. Nathan took longer. He read the page twice. Then he looked at me, and I could see him doing the arithmetic, going back through every conversation, every assumption, every calculation he had made about what his mother was worth. "How much?" he asked. Hargrove placed the valuation statement on the table. Dana picked it up. Her hand was steady, but her color was not. She stared at the bottom line for a long moment. $19,840,000. And then she set the paper down with extreme care, as though it might shatter. "She was a housewife," Gwen whispered. "She was an investor," I said. "She was the most disciplined person I ever knew, and none of us knew it." Hargrove gave them 30 seconds with the silence. Then he opened the second document. "In addition to the primary asset disclosure, I need to inform you of the terms governing any potential distribution to secondary beneficiaries. The trust specifies that no distribution shall occur without the written authorization of the trustee. That is your father." He looked at all 3 of them in turn. "Furthermore, the trust incorporates by reference a document your mother titled her family account, a record of loans made by Carol Morrison to her children over a period of 17 years. Those loans, per the trust instrument, were not gifts. They were demand obligations, due and payable to the estate upon her death." He slid the third document across. "The total outstanding balance owed to the Carol Morrison Living Trust by Nathan David Morrison and Gwen Patricia Morrison, and by extension, their respective spouses where applicable, is $370,000. You have 30 days from today to make arrangements for repayment. If repayment is not received, the trust will pursue recovery through the courts, including wage attachment and asset lien." The room went very quiet. Nathan's composure left him in pieces. His shoulders dropped first, then his face. He looked at me the way a man looks when he realizes that every advantage he thought he had was borrowed and the bill has come due. Dana did not crumble. Dana recalibrated. I watched it happen. She looked at the trust document, then at Nathan. And the assessment she was making was not about how to fix the situation, but about how much of the damage was survivable. I recognized the look. It was the same look she'd had at the cemetery when she handed me the Lakeview Gardens brochure. "The tax lien letter," she said. "It was not a question. It was a test," I said. "You knew about the money when you came home that night." "I knew everything," I said, "including what's in the family account. Every line of it." Dana looked at Nathan. Something passed between them that I did not need to decode. Gwen was crying quietly, not the aggressive, weaponized crying I had half expected. Just the ordinary crying of someone who has run out of arguments. "Dad," she said, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything." "It's a start," I said. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I picked up the green spiral notebook from the table where Hargrove had placed it, and I held it against my side. James will be in contact regarding the repayment schedule, I said. The house on Calvert Street will not be going on the market. I'll be moving back in this week. I looked at Nathan and Dana. Your personal effects are still there. You have until Thursday. I walked out of the conference room and took the elevator to the lobby. I will not tell you that justice felt like triumph. It didn't. It felt like the end of something long and necessary, like setting down a weight you didn't know you were carrying until your arms stopped aching. The weeks that followed moved fast and then slow again. Hargrove's team began the repayment proceedings. Nathan made his first payment, a small one, earnest rather than calculated, within 2 weeks. Dana filed for separation 6 days after the meeting and relocated to her sister's apartment in Columbus. The marriage, apparently, could not survive the revelation that the inheritance she had been mentally spending for years was not hers to spend. I moved back into Calvert Street on a Thursday morning. The house had been damaged but not destroyed. A broken cabinet hinge, some boxes missing, the good dishes gone. I fixed what I could fix myself and replaced what I couldn't. It was still the house Carol had made into a home, and the roses along the back fence were beginning to show their first green shoots of the season. I called Mr. Crawford on a Monday morning, because Mondays felt appropriate. We talked for an hour. I told him what I wanted to do, and he told me Carol had anticipated something like it and had left a specific allocation set aside. The Carol Morrison Trades Fund opened its first application cycle 8 weeks later. Its purpose was to provide full scholarships to women over 40 who wanted to train in skilled trades, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, the kind of work that paid a real living, but that nobody ever told them they were allowed to do. Carol had spent 30 years watching me come home from exactly that kind of work, and I think she understood its value in a way I had taken for granted. The first scholarship went to a 53-year-old woman from Norwood who wanted to become a licensed electrician. She had been a cashier for 22 years, and her youngest daughter had just started college. I signed the authorization form at the kitchen table on Calvert Street, with the green spiral notebook beside me and Carol's photograph on the wall above the mantel, and I thought about 28 years of Saturday mornings and a thermos of black coffee and a woman who never once asked for credit for any of it. 6 months after the meeting at Hargrove's office, I received a letter from Gwen. Not an email, an actual letter, written by hand on plain white stationery. She said she had been in therapy. She said she understood now that she had let fear and entitlement make decisions that she was ashamed of. She said she wasn't asking for anything, just wanted me to know. I read the letter twice. I put it in the kitchen drawer beside the measuring tape and the takeout menus. In the ordinary drawer where ordinary things are kept. Not in the family account. Not in any ledger. Just in the drawer. I haven't answered it yet. But I haven't thrown it away either. Some mornings, I drive out to Maple Ridge Road and sit in the parking lot of the storage facility for a few minutes before I drive to the bank. The unit is empty now. I cleaned it out in April, but the building is still there and the drive still feels like hers. Like I'm tracing the route she knew by heart for nearly 3 decades, while I was home reading the paper and assuming I understood the shape of our life together. I didn't. Not fully. She was not a mystery I failed to solve. She was a woman who loved me enough to carry something alone for a very long time, and who trusted me enough, at the end, to leave me the map. I am 66 years old. I have no mortgage. I have a trust that generates more money than I will ever spend. I have a fund in my wife's name that is changing real lives, one application at a time. And I have, sitting on the dresser in our bedroom, an empty wooden jewelry box with a brass latch, the box her father made for her when she was 16. Open now, and completely at rest. Every Saturday morning I make 2 cups of coffee out of habit. I drink mine. I leave hers. It cools on the counter while the morning light comes through the kitchen window, and I think that is exactly where it belongs. If you've ever been underestimated by the people you loved most, leave a comment below. And if Carol's story moved you the way it moved me to tell it, please hit that like button and subscribe to Revenge Saga, because the next story is already waiting, and you won't want to miss it.